More than 340 people have died trying to stand on the summit of Mount Everest, and their bodies helped map the way for everyone who came after. It is the highest point on the surface of the Earth, 8,849 meters above the sea, high enough that the top of it sits in a layer of air where the human body slowly begins to die. And yet every spring, hundreds of people line up to climb it. This is the whole story of Everest. How it was built, how it was first climbed, what it does to the body, and why, after 70 years, it still kills. Let me explain the mountain from the bottom up. Everest stands on the border between Nepal and Tibet, in the Himalaya, the highest mountain range on the planet. In Nepal it is called, in Tibet, Goddess Mother of the World. The name we use in English comes from Sir George Everest, a British surveyor who never even saw it. The height was settled in 1856 by a survey team working from over 100 miles away, doing the trigonometry by hand. They landed on a number startlingly close to the one we use today. At 8,849 meters, the summit is nearly the cruising altitude of a passenger jet. If you stood on top, roughly 2/3 of the atmosphere would be below you. There is a common myth to clear up first. Measured from base to peak, Everest is not the tallest mountain on Earth. That is Mauna Kea in Hawaii, most of which is underwater. Measured from the center of the Earth, the winner is Chimborazo in Ecuador, because the planet bulges at the equator. Everest wins on the only measure that matters to a climber. No point on the surface of the world is further from sea level. Nothing else on Earth reaches into the sky this far. Everest exists because two continents collided. Around 50 million years ago, the landmass carrying India drifted north and slammed into Asia. Neither plate would sink, so the crust between them buckled and folded upward, and it is still rising today. India is still pushing north by a few centimeters a year, and Everest grows by a small fraction of that, while erosion and the occasional earthquake grind it back down. Here's the strange part. The very top of the highest mountain on Earth is made of limestone that formed at the bottom of a sea. That summit rock is packed with the fossils of marine creatures that lived in a warm ocean before the Himalaya existed. The stone you would stand on, higher than anywhere else on the planet, was once a seabed. The mountain is not fixed either. The great earthquake that struck Nepal in 2015 shifted the whole region and triggered an avalanche that killed climbers at base camp. The roof of the world is still being built, and it is still moving. Above 8,000 meters, there is a name for where you are: the death zone. It is not a dramatic label. It is a physiological fact. At that altitude, the air holds only about 1/3 of the oxygen available at sea level, and no matter how long you wait, your body cannot adjust to it. You are, in a slow and measurable way, dying the entire time you're up there. The effects are brutal. Your body burns muscle for fuel and cannot digest food properly. Thinking slows. Simple decisions take minutes. Fluid can leak into the lungs or swell the brain, and either one can kill within hours. Most climbers spend as little time in the death zone as they possibly can, pushing for the summit and turning around fast. The summit of Everest sits more than 800 meters inside this zone. That is why nearly everyone who climbs it breathes bottled oxygen. And why the clock, not the cold and not the climb, is often the real enemy. Every hour up there costs something the body cannot get back. People imagine climbing Everest as a single heroic push to the top. It is almost the opposite. A typical expedition spends around 2 months on the mountain, and most of that time is spent doing very little on purpose. The reason is acclimatization. Your body needs weeks to adapt to the thinning air, growing more red blood cells to carry what little oxygen there is. So climbers do not go straight up. They climb to a higher camp, sleep there, then come back down to recover, then go higher still. A slow ladder of ups and downs known as rotations. The rule of thumb is simple. Climb high, sleep low. Rush it, and you get altitude sickness that can turn deadly. Take it slowly, and your blood quietly rebuilds itself for the thin air ahead. By the time a climber is ready for the summit, they have already been most of the way up the mountain several times. The final push to the top is only possible because of the weeks of patience that came before it. For most of human history, no one tried to climb Everest because no one was allowed near it. Both Nepal and Tibet were closed to outsiders. That changed in the 1920s when Tibet opened its northern approach to British expeditions. The most famous of the early climbers was George Mallory, an English school teacher and mountaineer. Asked by a reporter why he wanted to climb Everest, he gave the most famous answer in mountaineering: because it's there. In June 1924, Mallory and a young climber named Andrew Irvine set out for the summit from the mountain's north side. A teammate watched them through a break in the cloud, high on the ridge, moving strongly. Then, the cloud closed, and they were never seen alive again. The question haunted mountaineering for decades. Did they reach the top 29 years before anyone else? In 1999, an expedition found Mallory's body remarkably preserved, high on the north face. But the camera he was thought to be carrying was not with him, and without it, the mystery has never been solved. We still do not know if Everest was first climbed in 1924. The confirmed first ascent came on the 29th of May, 1953. A large British expedition had laid siege to the mountain from the Nepalese side, setting up a chain of camps up the mountain. The final push fell to two men: Edmund Hillary, a beekeeper from New Zealand, and a Sherpa mountaineer who had already been higher on Everest than almost anyone alive. Early that morning, they left their tent at the top camp and climbed the last stretch of ridge, including a steep rock step now named the Hillary Step in his honor. At 11:30, they stood on the summit, the first people known for certain to do so. They stayed only about 15 minutes. Hillary took a photograph of Tenzing on top, ice axe raised, one of the most famous images of the century. There's no photograph of Hillary up there because Tenzing had never used a camera and the summit was no place to teach him. When they came down, they simply told their teammate, "We knocked the bastard off." News reached London days later. On the morning the young Queen Elizabeth was crowned. Everest had been climbed at last. Most people who climb Everest today follow the same line Hillary and Tenzing did, up the south side from Nepal. It begins with a long trek to base camp at 5,364 meters, a tent city on a glacier. From there, the danger starts almost immediately. Just above base camp lies the Khumbu Icefall, a frozen, shattered river of ice that is constantly moving, riddled with deep crevasses and balanced towers of ice the size of buildings. Climbers cross it in the coldest, darkest hours before dawn, when the ice is most stable, using ladders lashed over the gaps. Above the icefall, the route climbs through a series of camps, up a vast glacial valley called the Western CWM, then up a steep wall of ice and onto the South Col at 7,906 meters, the last camp before the summit. From there, the summit push begins around midnight. Climbers move up through the death zone by headlamp, past a feature called the balcony, up the southeast ridge, over the Hillary Step, and onto the final snow slope. The summit day itself is a single, exhausting, sleepless push, often 18 hours or more. There is a second way up from the north in Tibet, the side Mallory tried. It is colder, windier, and more exposed, and for decades it was the only side open at all. Today, most climbers choose the south, but both routes share the same enemy overhead: the weather. Everest is tall enough to punch into the jet stream, the band of ferocious high-altitude wind that circles the planet. For most of the year, winds near the summit can exceed 200 kilometers an hour, strong enough to pluck a person off the ridge. Climbing is simply impossible in that. What makes Everest climbable at all is a brief lull. For a handful of days, usually in May, just before the summer monsoon arrives, the jet stream shifts north and the winds on the summit drop. That short, calm window is the only time thousands of people can realistically go for the top. It is also why they all go at once, and why a single bad forecast can strand an entire season on the mountain. Behind almost every person who stands on the summit of Everest is a Sherpa who made it possible. The Sherpa are an ethnic group from the high valleys of the Khumbu region in Nepal, and generations of living at altitude have given many of them an extraordinary ability to work where others can barely function. On a commercial expedition, Sherpa climbers do the most dangerous work on the mountain. A team known as the Icefall Doctors rebuilds the ladder route through the Khumbu Icefall every season. Others fix the ropes up the entire route, carry the loads, build the camps, and cross that deadly icefall again and again. Far more times than any client. When something goes wrong high on the mountain, it is very often a Sherpa who carries out the rescue. That work comes at a cost. Sherpas die on Everest at a higher rate than the clients they guide. In 2014, an avalanche in the icefall killed 16 Nepali workers in one morning. The summit photos rarely show the people who fixed every meter of rope that made the photo possible. Almost everyone climbs Everest with bottled oxygen. For a long time, many believed the summit was simply out of reach without it, that the human body could not survive up there on the air alone. Then, in 1978, two climbers, Reinhold Messner and Peter Habeler, reached the summit, breathing nothing but the mountain's own thin air, and proved the doubters wrong. 2 years later, Messner went back and climbed it completely alone, without oxygen, during the monsoon. Still one of the greatest feats in the sport. The records did not stop there. The first woman to summit Everest was Junko Tabei of Japan in 1975, weeks after being buried by an avalanche at her high camp. The youngest person to reach the top was just 13 years old, the oldest, 80. And one man, a Sherpa named Kami Rita, has stood on the summit of Everest more times than anyone in history, over 30 separate ascents. For a few extraordinary people, the deadliest mountain on Earth has become a place they return to again and again. Everest is no longer the empty frontier it was in 1953. Today, it is a commercial industry. A permit from the Nepali government to climb Everest costs around $11,000, and that is only the beginning. A guided expedition typically runs from $40,000 to well over $100,000, depending on how much support you buy. That money pays for oxygen, Sherpa support, weeks of food, and the fixed ropes up the entire mountain. The result is that on the rare good weather days, when the window opens, hundreds of climbers may push for the summit at once. The images that shocked the world in recent years show a single file line of people stretching up the summit ridge, waiting in the death zone for their turn on top. That waiting is dangerous. Every extra hour above 8,000 meters drains oxygen, strength, and time. And some climbers have died not from a fall or a storm, but simply from standing in a queue too long, too high, until their supplementary oxygen ran out. Everest can now be bought, but it still cannot be made safe. For all the ropes and oxygen and experience, Everest still kills. More than 340 people have died on the mountain since climbing began. The deadliest single storm came in the spring of 1996. Several expeditions were high on the mountain on summit day when a sudden storm rolled in, trapping climbers in a whiteout in the death zone as night fell. 8 people died over those 2 days, including 2 of the most experienced guides on the mountain who stayed behind to help clients. The books written about that disaster afterward are how most of the world first understood what Everest asks, and many who die here are never brought down. Recovering a body from the death zone is so dangerous and so expensive that most are left where they fell. Some have lain near the route for decades, and climbers pass them on the way to the top, using them, quietly, as grim landmarks. It is a sobering truth about the highest place on Earth. It is not only a summit, it is also one of the highest graveyards in the world. 70 years of expeditions have left a mark on Everest that has nothing to do with climbing. With hundreds of people on the mountain every season, each of them eating, camping, and using oxygen bottles for weeks, the waste adds up. Everest has been called the highest rubbish dump in the world. Abandoned tents, empty canisters, food packaging, and human waste, much of it frozen into the ice around the camps. In recent years, the government and Sherpa-led teams have run large cleanup expeditions, hauling tons of rubbish, and when possible, some of the dead, back down the mountain. And new rules now require climbers to bring their waste out with them. It is a strange final image of the highest place on the planet. Not an untouched wilderness, but a mountain we are now slowly trying to clean up after ourselves. What we leave on Everest tends to stay there, frozen, for a very long time. So, that is Everest. A seabed pushed into the sky by 2 colliding continents, capped with fossils, still rising, still moving. A mountain that was measured before it was ever approached, first climbed in 1953, and now climbed by hundreds every year. And one that, for all our ropes and oxygen and money, still takes lives every season. It is the highest thing a person can stand on, and it has never once been tamed. If you want the great mountains explained like this, clearly and honestly, consider subscribing. There is a whole range of them still to climb.